Sure, NATO is the multinational military partnership that many have been talking about in recent times. Of course, with the Trump administration's apparent shift away from European security, there have been talks of other military alliances and arrangements that could be alternatives to NATO. The three Baltic nations have been NATO members since 2004, but you might not know about the other alliance that these nations are members of. It's known as JEF, JEF. These three letters stand for Joint Expeditionary Force. It's a multinational military force made up of units from 10 nations, and of course we're only talking about it today because Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia are among those 10 nations. In this video we go over what JEF is, its recent activities, and why it exists when NATO multinational units exist across Europe. And so, led by the United Kingdom, the Joint Expeditionary Force currently consists of 10 nations: Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden. One document calls it a group of like-minded nations, but at the same time it's interesting to us how some countries have joined while others have not. Looking at the list, if not for the UK and the Netherlands, it would feel like a Baltic/Nordic/Scandinavian arrangement. However, with the Netherlands, maybe it's a cooperation between relatively small militaries. But then adding the UK, well, at least for us, it makes it hard to think of one common theme or thread with all 10 countries. Because if the UK and the Netherlands are members of the Joint Expeditionary Force, then why not also Germany and Poland? We imagine these countries would also be concerned with Baltic Sea security. Anyway, without trying to find a clear reason for member inclusion and exclusion, it is what it is, and any opportunity for multinational cooperation and coordination should be seen as a benefit to regional security. An official document notes that JEF is comprised of quote-unquote high readiness forces configured to respond rapidly to crises in the High North and Northern Europe. A Lithuanian Ministry of Defense page notes that it is a brigade-sized element, while somewhere else it was stated to be a division-sized force. However, in the case of JEF, the stated size doesn't matter too much, and we'll explain why later on in this video. The document goes on to say that JEF can integrate into larger international operations such as those led by NATO, the United Nations, or other coalitions. And so, how did it all start? Well, the UK conceived the idea of a joint expeditionary force in 2012, but it would take 2 years for something to materialize. Our guess is that Russia's annexation of Crimea was a major factor in expediting the process. During the Wales NATO summit in September 2014, the United Kingdom's Defence Secretary led the creation of the Joint Expeditionary Force with the potential to mobilize up to 10,000 troops. And then in 2015, JEF participant nations signed a Foundation Memorandum of Understanding in London, and the force was declared at an initial operating capability. The first nations to make up JEF were the UK, of course, as well as Denmark, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, the Netherlands, and Norway. Sweden and Finland, not members of NATO at the time, joined in 2017, and Iceland joined in 2021. Full operating capability for JEF was declared in June 2018. Since its founding, it looks like the Joint Expeditionary Force has held regular summits and engaged in a few exercises. The most recent activation of JEF, at least at the time of making this video, was in late 2024. This was Exercise Joint Protector 24, held in Liepāja, Latvia. The exercise scenario, developed by the UK's Integrated Warfare Centre, prompted a range of actions designed to simulate the rapid response needed in the face of potential conflict in the region. The official JEF website says that real-world complexity of these situations is underscored by the continued tensions in the Baltic region, particularly in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. It adds that JEF's presence in Latvia reinforces the security for both its members and for the broader region. A JEF exercise held the year prior was the coalition's first activation following a real-world incident. The force deployed to the Baltic and North Sea regions in response to critical infrastructure breaches, including a leak detected in a gas pipeline connecting Finland and Estonia, with many suspecting that it was sabotage conducted by a certain hostile country. This JEF response included maritime and air capabilities deployed in the Nordic-Baltic region to protect critical underwater infrastructure. More recently, in December 2024, there was damage to the Estlink 2 power cable and several data undersea cables in the Baltic Sea. JEF's response was to reactivate elements of an agreed JEF response option to help monitor threats to undersea infrastructure. Okay, and so what is actually a part of JEF? Well, the most important thing to know about the Joint Expeditionary Force is that it's not a standing force. And so because of this, it draws from participant nation forces only when conducting activity. Therefore, it could be much smaller than a brigade. For a given JEF activity or operation, the UK, being the framework nation, nominates the most appropriate deployed operational headquarters and operational commander. Participant nations then choose to assign headquarters staff, force elements, and support functions to the nominated operational commander. If we were to try and put it into simpler language, a country would say, "We think this situation needs a response from JEF," and then member nations would decide on the scale of the operation and what they wish to contribute to it. One document felt it necessary to emphasize that participant nations are not allocating forces to the UK, and are instead allocating forces for a specific activity or operation. It adds that national contingents to the JEF always remain under the full command of their respective national authority. Because of JEF's fluid structure in terms of forces, units assigned rotate or change from time to time. Nonetheless, from what we could find, here are some examples of units that have been assigned to JEF exercises and activities. A 2022 naval exercise included 110 Finnish naval soldiers, including 40 conscripts. Finland also contributed a Rauma-class fast attack craft to the exercise. Lithuania's contribution to the same exercise was a Navy patrol ship and an anti-mine ship. A May 2022 statement from Lithuania's defense ministry stated that Lithuania had a company-sized unit of the King Mindaugas Hussar Battalion assigned to the JEF. This is in addition to a Lithuanian staff officer serving at the Joint Force headquarters in the UK. It's been a few years since this information was released, so we don't know if this is still the case. A few years prior, 160 soldiers of the 3rd Company of the Lithuanian Grand Duke Algirdas Mechanized Infantry Battalion participated in a JEF exercise. Another Lithuanian military article notes that AW-159 Wildcat helicopters of the British Army were deployed to Lithuania as a means of defense and deterrence in 2022. And then an early 2023 JEF exercise in Norway involved a company from the UK's 2nd Battalion Parachute Regiment. Finally, with that first real-world deployment in late 2023 and early 2024, an article from Naval News says that the JEF Maritime Task Force includes the Royal Navy's Type 23 frigate HMS Richmond, and altogether this operation consisted of 30 ships and 11 aircraft drawn from 9 of JEF's 10 member states. The UK alone contributed 7 Royal Navy ships and a Royal Air Force P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft. Sorry, Latvians and Estonians, we were unable to find any mention of specific units deployed on JEF exercises. So that's everything we could find about JEF. It's great to see more multinational cooperation, which includes the Baltic nations. We have to imagine that JEF was formed because NATO was getting so large and diverse that getting all members to agree on certain operations was getting to be challenging. Now, to be clear, this is just a guess. However, given how stubborn NATO members like Turkey and Hungary have been on various issues, it makes sense. This includes getting Finland and Sweden to be accepted as NATO members. Where most other NATO countries have essentially been in agreement, we can see the benefits of a smaller and tighter collaboration like JEF in the face of potential NATO dysfunctionality and paralysis. The Center for Strategic and International Studies highlights that such groups have proliferated in recent years as nations hedge and diversify against shifting balances in regional and global power. It also agrees with our own theory, highlighting that, unlike NATO and the European Union, the JEF is not a group that requires consensus to conduct operations and deploy forces. This is designed to add considerably to its responsiveness. So, what do you think of the Joint Expeditionary Force? Let us know by leaving a comment.